Welcome to David Snead Ukraine Missions, a Calvary Chapel podcast based out of Lviv, Ukraine. Alrighty, psych myself up. Here we go. Hey everyone, my name is David Snead. I'm a missionary in Lviv, Ukraine, and today we are talking with Nate Medlong, or Nathan. What do you want us to call you today?
My mom always called me Nate. I only get called Nathan if I'm about to get a spanking, so from my mom. So
sweet. Alrighty, so Nate Medlong. Nate is a pastor in over at Kharkiv. Another Calvary Chapel guy here in Ukraine. Kharkiv is. Tell us a little bit about the city and what it's known for and that kind of thing.
Kharkiv, it's the second biggest city in Ukraine. It's unofficially, I'd say, at least 2 million people. I think officially right now it's something like 1.7 million or something. I've heard so many different statistics, but it's a very big city. But if you've come from the States, you can see a city that's 2 million people, and it takes up so much more space because it's so many more houses and everything. It's so much here is very vertical. There's so many, what do you call them? Like multi-story buildings.
Yes,
I want to say
skyscrapers.
No, they're
like
not
that.
skyscrapers. They're like high-rise apartment buildings. That's the word.
Yeah.
I've been here too long. My English is getting worse.
And I feel you, man.
You know the feeling. So there's a lot. We actually live in a private house on the very edge of town that we built recently, but that's later in the story.
Yeah.
Kharkiv is kind of this interesting city. It's a city of universities. A lot of them. There's more university students in Kharkiv than any other city in Ukraine. And there's quite a few factories, but then it's a huge center for IT. They call it the Silicon Valley of Europe. Actually, I've heard it referred to. Lviv, actually, where you live, is considered to be like the second Silicon Valley. And so it's just kind of this interesting mix of factories, factory workers, IT professionals, and university students. So it's such an interesting, busy
It's
city.
crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very, very metropolitan, I guess, or whatever.
Yeah.
Nate and I know each other from Horizon, Indianapolis. We're both sent out of the same church. How can people contact you online if they want to?
Well, mainly we use Facebook as our biggest thing, and Instagram. Nate, you can just look Nate Medlong at Instagram, Facebook, Telegram. I don't know if people in America use Telegram.
I have no idea.
I'm on I'm on Voxer. I'm on Viber. I stay away from WhatsApp because, come on, I have way too many things. I think I still have Skype somewhere, but probably not. What I was going to say, actually, I only came to Calvary Chapel in Cleveland in 1999, and I was there for about 2-3 years before I came to Indianapolis. Okay. So maybe a few years, but not much. I actually came from a lot of different churches growing up.
So we have that in common.
Everything from Episcopal to Christian Missionary Alliance to even there was a couple charismatic churches I visited, so to some Baptist churches. So
yeah, cool. So tell us a little bit about your family and what you do.
My family. Well, I was born at a very young age. And sorry, that's a dad joke. See,
that's an old Medlong line, yes.
That's a dad joke line because if I have 6 kids, so you have to get good at dad jokes. I'm from a big family of 11 kids. I'm the third oldest of 11, and my wife is the second in 6 kids. And after we got married, we'd always served in orphanages, but we have 6 kids, 4 of which we've either adopted or had just fostering. 2 of our kids, by the time we were in the position to adopt, they were too old for legally for us to adopt them. So they're all our kids, but we have 2 biological kids at the end that are pretty young. Our oldest is we have a 26-year-old, a 22-year-old, an 18-year-old, almost 15-year-old, and then we have the 6-year-old and 4-year-old. 5 girls and 1 boy. So
very cool. Very cool. And then what do you do in Kharkiv?
What do I do? Right now I sit at home, quarantine, trying to build a chicken coop and gardening. No, that's the quarantine me.
Yes.
And live streaming a lot, services. But what do we use in general? What are we doing? my wife and I mean, we're really a team. And I think that, especially in ministry, it can be easily to overlook that. And especially because the amount of kids we have in the ages of our younger kids, there's a lot of times we kind of have to play tag team. And so there's times where I'm busy in ministry and she's at home, and then there's times she's busy and I'm at home with the kids. And so and then we do things together. My wife translates for me. Anytime we have a major service in our church, like a main service, we always have translation. Even if the teaching is in Russian, we have translation into English, English into Russian, because we have foreign students in our church. Like I said, it's a huge city, lots of students, and even foreign business people come. Mm-hmm. So we're busy. As pastor, like I teach Bible study, the main services. We also are involved in discipling guys. I am. My wife's not discipling guys, of course. I hope not. No. I'm actually training some guys in the church to become preachers right now. I have a group of 5 guys with me that we're meeting weekly to teach them just the fundamentals of preaching. And I also involved with sound ministry. Like as far as like mixing, I've been involved in the sound technical ministry for 25 years, maybe something like that, since I was a teenager. And I had trained some guys, but they all moved away, so I've been back to doing it. So if you see any of our
that's actually what you were doing when you were like involved in missions and sound when we were at Horizon at the same time.
That's what I did. I was on staff as the main sound guy, sound technician, and I was also overseeing as missions coordinator. So we do that. My wife is in charge of the children's ministry. She writes or translates a lot of the curriculum for children's ministry, organizes it, leads women's Bible studies, disciples people. Over many years, my wife and I have been involved with Orphan Ministry. We're not doing any direct orphan ministry at the moment, partially because a lot of those doors are closed right now. But like I said, we have our own orphan ministry.
Yeah, I would still call that orphan ministry. Like, yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean we do, and I'll be honest with you, I don't really want to talk about a lot of it, but it's a very exhausting. I'd say that taking these kids to live with us is probably the most involved and intense ministry we've done in our lives. But besides that, we work part-time because, as missionaries, there's never enough money. I work part-time at a coffee shop. Sometimes I used to do work as a barista. Now I just kind of help with developing their menus, and sometimes I'll help train their employees on how to have more of an American kind of welcoming customer service attitude. I also just do shopping for the coffee shop. I also do voiceovers occasionally in English for companies here, basically anything to feed your kids. My wife teaches Russian part-time, and we just do other things like that. So we're pretty busy.
Cool. And do you guys have a blog or something? Like if people wanted to support you, like if they had to,
Well, through our Facebook, we have everything.
Okay.
But I don't have a blog currently. Yeah, I wanted to start writing a blog again, but it's just, there's too much going on.
Yeah.
But yeah. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned it, because actually reminded me I need to put a new link on our page, because our old links expired.
I get you. Yeah. Are you guys through Horizon 2 with your giving? Because that was crazy, like quarantine, and at the same time we're going through a transition in the giving platform. That was nuts.
Yeah, it was difficult, but they did a video. A live stream video. Brandon and Grayson, the guy there, did a video that explained it, and it was really good. It was really helpful. And the fact is, I realized quickly it was something that had been in the process for a long time, and so like I didn't take it personally, and I understood why.
For sure.
Because I guess for them it's there's more money that goes through, there's less cost taken out, things like that. But it was definitely frustrating. We'll see. It still remains to be seen if it's going to have an impact on our giving.
Yeah, I think there was like 1 or 2 that missed a month for me, but I think like aside from those 2, I think most of my supporters already switched over to the new platform and everything. So praise the Lord for that.
Well, we'll find out in a couple of days when the new checks go. Yeah. We'll find out on Monday when the check's clear.
That's for sure. So one of the reasons why I invited you on the podcast, and one of the things I want to hear from you again, because I've visited Kharkiv a couple times. Kharkiv was one of the 3 cities that the Bible College visited when I very first came over to Ukraine in 2006. So our time walking around on the big square through the park, evangelism, doing worship there, and like a little outdoor concert and stuff like that. Those are some of my first memories of Ukraine, and so Nate is a part of how God brought me into this new ministry, this new season of my life. So but I remember you telling us how God, like the different like stages of your life of how God brought you there. And I wanted to hear that story again and give everyone a chance to hear that here. So
Wow.
give me the long version of what is God's
Oh,
story of grace with Nathan Medlong? How did he bring
well,
you over there?
I know that your version of the long version has a lot of space because I heard Joel went for 4 hours. So
Yeah.
my goal is to beat that by being shorter.
Yeah, we had a little Facebook conversation earlier this week about who talks
Wow.
more. So yeah,
I don't want to hear myself speak for 4 hours. So
good deal.
yeah, I'll say this: 2006, you guys came. That was the first group that we hosted after I moved here. I moved here in 2005. And that was a really cool group. If I remember correctly, there was how many guys were on your team? We had like
Let's
8.
see. Josh, me, Chris Cox, Jordan, and Jared, and David Rossi.
Nathan Gee.
Yeah, Guy.
Yeah, Gee was there.
And
yeah, because I know Gee he was feeling sick. He'd go to bed early.
Yeah, he was like sick the entire trip.
Yeah, and guess where? He went and climbed in my bed every night. And so I'm like, all day long, I had all these crazy, stinky students having push-up contests in my apartment, and there was no room for even me to sleep in my own bed. It was like, he was there, somebody else was on the floor, 3 guys were in the living room. Basically, it smelled like a gym locker in there. I felt bad for the girls when they came to eat lunch there. It was bad. Yeah, that was really cool. That was, things were just starting. I think I remember what I talked about. Until recently, until the Euromaidan movement, there was this huge Lenin statue that stood in the back of the square, the main square in the city. And it's a very big square. Some would say it was one of the biggest in Europe. Someone once asked me if they have any squares or areas this big in America. I said, yeah, every shopping mall parking lot is this big. And I'm like, and sometimes it looks like that here because they still park cars in there all the time now. But so when I was young, this was a long, long time ago. I was born in 1978, so it was probably about 85. It's probably 7 years old. This is when the Soviet Union still was a thing. It still existed. And I remember reading I was homeschooled, and we had some subject about religious freedom and stuff. I was like 7. I was hearing about the Soviet Union and how kids like me didn't have the same freedom to like go to church or read the Bible and things like that. And I was like, this makes me so sad because I love church, especially homeschool. Back when homeschool was just started, we didn't have co-ops or anything cool like that. And so it was like, that was the time I got to see people besides my neighbors, So I was like, what do you mean they can't go to church? And it broke my heart because I love the Bible. As a kid, I was learning memory verses since before I could read. And I started praying, and I just prayed as this naive 7-year-old or 6-year-old that the government would change in the Soviet Union so that kids like me could learn about Jesus. And I would pray, and every time I hear something of the Soviet Union, I would pray. And I remember, was it when the Berlin Wall came down? I was like, wow, this is something's happening. And I kept praying. And actually, here's an interesting thing. I remember watching an episode of Alvin and the Chipmunks. Remember that show? And there was this episode, it was before the Berlin Wall came down, where they were flying to do a concert near the Berlin Wall. He had this whole dream while he was flying. Alvin did about going over there and being chased by the communists, whatever. Wow. And then he's like, and then he woke up and they're flying near the Berlin Wall. It looked at it like maybe one day that wall won't be there anymore. I remember as a kid, I was like, yeah. And to me, it was this representation of, the Soviet Union and the lack of freedom. And then when that wall came down in real life, it wasn't much longer after that Alvin and the Chipmunks episode, So parents, God can work in your kids' lives through cartoons. So let them watch cartoons sometimes. And so basically through all of that, and then eventually everything happened in Ukraine, and then the Soviet Union, well, Ukraine too. And then, it started to change, the government changed. And I remember watching all those Lenin statues go. I mean, I don't know, you might have been too young for that, but you've probably seen videos where the Lenin statue, well, you've seen them now here.
Yeah.
Like, 6 years ago. But I remember that image in my mind of all those statues coming down was such a huge deal. And I just remember the Lord, I was probably like 11 or something, or 12, and the Lord was speaking to my heart. See, I answered prayer. Now I knew it wasn't just me that was praying. I know a lot of people were praying, but I saw it was just the work of the Lord. The Lord used that to show me the power of prayer. And then I just remember specifically the Lord spoke to my heart, says, now pray for people to go. And I remember a few years later, I was, like I said, I have a different church background. When I was a kid, we were part of an Episcopal church, and that's basically connected to Anglican church, at least it was. And my parents had started ministering in that church. It was an inner city church, as basically working with youth. But by the time I was getting to this age, there really weren't youth left. That ministry was gone, and the church was getting more liberal. And eventually we made the decision to leave, and we started going to a Christian Missionary Alliance church. And there was a missionary there from Russia, and he was talking about, there's so many doors open and there's so many things happening. They were talking about the word of God going out. The Lord reminded me of prayer. But I'll be honest, like from a young age, I felt God had given me a call to ministry from probably around 11, 12 years old. I didn't think it was to be a missionary. And I thought, that's interesting. I said, but I don't want to go to Russia. I still kind of don't really want to go to Russia itself, but that's all.
People still think we're in Russia, so yeah.
I know, but no, we're not. People think Kharkiv is part of Russia because we speak Russian. We like speaking Russian. We're like the Americans. We take their language and make it better. That's what we say here. I just tell Ukrainians, those Ukrainians in East Ukraine, let's be like the Americans. We beat them, we kick them out of our country, and we make their language better. But if you think it's really good, it turns into Ukrainian. But Ukrainian's better than Russian anyway. So anyway, there you can cut that part of nationalism out of this message if you want.
I think I might leave that one in there.
Jeez, of course you would.
We talk with Joel. I don't know if you watched the interview. With Joel, we talked about that kind of stuff, and yeah,
I need to give a couple of weeks of time so that I can watch those. It's a long movie.
Yeah.
I may come back and watch pieces of it later. We'll see. Anyway, so basically, like, I heard Russia. I was like, okay, Russia, whatever. And then it was like 1994, Winter Olympics. That was the year the whole huge scandal between Nancy Kerrigan and Tanya Harding. Remember, Tanya Harding is the one that got her boyfriend to kneecap Nancy Kerrigan so she'd have a shot at getting.
Isn't that like the origin of the kneecapping? No, I think mafia.
Well, kneecap goes back, but yeah. And so there's that whole, and all the Olympics, all the news, at least in America, was focused on these two, because they both were in the Olympics, and there was still an investigation going on, but nothing had been decided that she was officially guilty. Tanya Harding was. So all the focus was on these figure skaters, and then there's this little orphan girl from Dnipropetrovsk, Ukraine, representing Ukraine, Oksana Bayul. And they're like, Ukraine. I'm like, what is that? Is that a flag? Yellow and blue? That's it? 2 colors? I'm a kid. I'm like, where's the stripes? Where's the stars? Where's the creativity? It's just 2 bars. So now minimalism is cool, so I really like it. But back then I was like, that's kind of they're a new country. Can they come up with something more interesting? But I can't. I love the Ukrainian flag now. I now understand fashion and style. I was a kid that thought it was cool to wear Hawaiian shirts, whatever. So I didn't know what I was talking about. So nobody send me hate mail, please.
Yeah, don't worry.
And I've learned, especially in this country, you have to be careful. People love to write things in comments. I did this video recently in Ukrainian for a voiceover company because it was for this Manhattan. It's like this company that has an American name for a building project, and so they thought it'd be cool to have an American accented person doing the voiceover. So it was cool, and all these people started writing angry comments under in the video. It was an advertisement video, but it was on YouTube, saying we know that accent. That's not why they hired a Russian actor to do this. It's this is some Moscow. Some Moscow is trying to speak Ukrainian. This is wrong. And one of my friends had to write, Some of my friends had to write, no, this is actually an American, and he has that accent because he lives in Kharkiv. He actually is not some Russian spy trying to take over Ukrainian accent, Ukrainian language jobs. So
Oh gosh.
that's why I have to
That's
be careful.
terrible.
But anyway, I know that's a complete random side note. I thought you'd think it's funny. But basically, this girl, Oksana Biul, she came for me. She came when all the focus on everybody else, and she won the gold, right? I
Yeah.
was like, Ukraine. There's a part of Ukraine. I'm like, oh. So the Soviet Union isn't just Russia. I'm like, cool, man. Because I was 6 when I heard about the Soviet Union. Come on, don't expect me to know everything. And so, I would pray, and I kind of would forget about it. Every time I would hear about Soviet Union or stuff, or the former Soviet Union, I would pray, but I kind of would forget about it. And I remember it was probably about 2000, somewhere 2000, George Markey, the guy who started the first Kharkiv Chapel in Ukraine, had a quick stop in Cleveland. Like, he was literally flying back to Ukraine. He had a layover in Cleveland, I guess. And he came and spoke at our church, and he started talking about how this great work is opening up in Ukraine, and God's doing a great work. And, the Holy Spirit's working, and we just need workers, but then of course he says stuff like, stop sending us your stupid guys that just want to meet girls and take them away.
Yeah.
And so, like, my awareness was building. And then that summer, I think, or the next year, my brother and my best friend went to Bible college. I had to meet Kharkiv Chapel Bible College in Indianapolis. I'd actually wanted to go for years. I found the college. I dragged them with me to check out, and the Lord just told me no. And so they ended up going. And they went that year to Dnipropetrovsk in Ukraine on a mission trip. And every night that summer, my brother basically cried because he missed people from there. And it was such an amazing work. And he was staying in contact on AOL Instant Messenger or ICQ or whatever it was they had back then. And I was like, oh, wow. And I get to Bible college my first year. So I went the next year, and everybody was talking about Ukraine this, Ukraine that, Ukraine this. There were several missionaries that had moved. The Bible college director was getting ready to move to Kharkiv, actually. Ben Morrison, Westhoff, 2 other guys that were there were finishing up their second year. We're getting ready to move to Ukraine. And it was just like Ukraine. It was like everywhere. And I have this thing, maybe it's like anti-peer pressure, where if everybody's doing something, I don't want to do it. I just natural in me. Where like everybody, except for now. Well, no, even now, because everybody's not wearing their masks anymore at the store. I'm still wearing my mask at the store. But if people watch this podcast in 10 years, like, why would you wear a mask at a store? What are you, Batman? But anyway, read a history book, kids. So,
it's a great time to quote The Princess Bride. Everybody will be wearing them someday. They're quite comfortable.
Yes. Yes. But anyway, so I didn't want to go. And then they decided at the end of every year, we have this practicum, like you came to us on your practicum, and we're going to go to Dnipropetrovsk and to Kiev, because Dnipropetrovsk, we're going to spend 2 weeks and a week in Kiev. Dnipropetrovsk the church was only about a year and a half old at the time. That was the one my brother had gone to right after it started. And then Kiev, we had that national conference that had just started like a couple years before. And so, basically, we're going, and I didn't really want to go. I was like, let's go to Germany. Let's go to like England. Let's go wherever, like I just wanted to go somewhere else. And so we went, and I'll just be honest with you. There's a lot of things about that group was absolutely not the way you would have a missions trip team. There's like 26.
I heard stories about
everybody's heard about this team. Now, it's interesting for all the negative stories about that team. Obviously, like, it did a great work in my life. And, some people we love, one person that we care about greatly, Levi Brinkerhoff, he's a missionary in Ukraine. His wife got saved through the street evangelism of my group. And she's been very useful. God has used her greatly in ministry, and Levi's pretty happy she's saved, and he got to marry her.
Oh yeah, they're a wonderful couple.
But there was a lot of things that are negative. Well, this is just too big. I would never of my own free will receive a team of 26 people again. I think 12 is about as big as I go. But
nice
we went.
Number.
Yeah, I prefer like 6 or 8. But so basically, it was a crazy trip. But this was a time in Ukraine where people actually would talk to you on the street easily. And if you handed somebody a tract, they would stop. They would read it. They would read the whole thing before. They wouldn't throw it away. They would actually consider that. This was 2002. And we saw just like, so many people. Every night we'd go out with translators in the parks. There's so many people in the park. I think if you live in America, it's hard to imagine how many people hang out in the parks and the squares in the summer. I mean, you're talking 100,000 people in the park in some of these cities. I mean, it's not even an exaggeration, especially with like May holidays. I don't know how it is. Maybe you guys have a different holiday, but you think about what is the busiest holiday in Lviv where everybody is downtown in the squares.
We have way too many of those. Lviv is just a tourist city, and yeah, I don't know if there's a.
I'm not even talking.
We have the coffee festival. We have the jazz festival. We have, like, and it's always like hundreds, like thousands and thousands upon thousands.
So. And so it happens. Yeah. The amount of people together you only see at sports events in America, really. Mm-hmm. And every night we just walk, and people would want to talk to us. We talk to them, and I think. Who knows where any of these people ended up? Because, like I said, Nasty is the only one I know that ended up growing in the church. But there was like 130 people over the course of a few weeks on one-on-one conversations that prayed to receive Jesus.
Oh, wow.
But I would go, and we'd go in groups of 3 or something, and I would just not usually talk, or I try to talk. Every time I try to talk to somebody, it's just like there was nothing. People were just like, "Okay, why are you talking to me?" And so I prayed. I remember just thinking, like, I don't really care. Like, I'm doing this because I know I'm supposed to do this. I'm sharing because it's the right thing to do. And I remember one night I'm laying there. We were like 15 guys crammed in this little old broken hut. Like, and my little place for my bed was literally like between the refrigerator and the sink in the kitchen. And guys, I would wake up with guys standing over me. I could like brushing their teeth and getting water on me. And I'm laying there in my damp bed because and just praying like, Lord, like, I don't care. Like it's cool to be here. I love seeing there's new things, but Lord, I can't share with these people unless you give me your heart for them. I said, Lord, because I just don't want to be a hypocrite, and I don't want to I want there to be, I realize completely that without the power of the Holy Spirit, then there's no point. There's no use. And I just remember praying, like, Lord, give me your heart. And the next day, I think it was May Day, actually, May 1st, which is a huge holiday here. We were going, and we took this tram, and we had to walk down this huge set of stairs that goes into the park. And as soon as we get to the stairs, you go down, you suddenly see it, and there's so many people. I mean, like 100,000 people maybe in this park. I mean, at least 50 for sure. I mean, it's my memories. The numbers get bigger with age, I'm sure. But like, there were so many people. This huge park. And when I mean park, it's like squares. I don't just mean like playgrounds and grass. I mean, it's like huge squares, and you couldn't see ground. You just saw people. And I just remember the Lord just gave me this verse, is in Matthew, where it says, like, he saw them as sheep without a shepherd, and he had compassion on them. And then I just started to cry, like ugly cry. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I caught it, not just here, but I caught in my heart God's passion for this country and the people. And so from then, it just everything changed, And of course, I felt during the course of that trip, I felt God spoke to me clearly about him calling me to be a missionary. The only thing is he didn't tell me what city, he didn't tell me how it was going to work. And for me, growing up as a poor kid, with a big family, and like everything was a stretch. Like even the only way I worked and went to Bible college is because I worked full time almost. Mm-hmm. And everything was always like God would provide by giving me some work to do or different things. And the idea of being a missionary was just completely out of my idea. And so like I went back and I told my pastor, and he's like, "Oh, that's interesting." And that's all he said, which is cool. Yeah. And then I went and studied another year. And then, because it was 2 years school, then we finished. And then I went to Kharkiv at the end of my second year. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I loved Kharkiv. I loved the people here. I really, some of the people that had moved here to help out were actually people that had been translators for us and our first cream, because during that time, they graduated from college, from university, and they decided to move to help with the church plant here. And I loved the city. I loved the people. The person that was the pastor at the time was my old Bible college director for my first year. And he was a good guy. He's a great evangelist and church planter, but we had very, very, very different mentalities on what ministry is and how ministry should be run. And even personality, we just had very different personalities. And so I never would have even thought, I would have never considered being a missionary in Kharkiv, but just because, it's one thing to like survive a year in Bible college under somebody that you're not particularly comfortable with, but like to make a commitment, a long-term commitment to serve with somebody in the team.
Oh, yeah.
unity of team is very important, and having unity of vision is very important. It doesn't mean you always have to agree, but like there has to be, like, especially if you're putting yourself underneath somebody in authority. And he had a very strong opinion on how things should be run and how people under him should act. And so because of that, I realized it wasn't, I never even considered Kharkiv just for that reason. I love the city. I love the people. Because I'm from a bigger city in America, from Cleveland, it felt very comfortable. But I didn't see it. So, come back, and I'm broken because I'm done with Bible college. I don't know, do I move back to Cleveland from Indianapolis or not? But I was already working in sound part-time. It's like, I didn't know what to do. I had no money because any money I had was spent on Bible college.
Yeah.
And then I was just so
tell us
broken.
about the Oreos. Do you remember your Oreo story?
Actually, it's my brother's Oreo story. Are you talking
Oh,
about
okay.
sex?
I'm sorry. I thought.
Are you talking about sex? Is that what you want to talk about?
No, I'm not talking about sex. I'm talking about realizing that you can eat a whole stack of Oreos instead of just taking one or two. Is that?
That's a different story. Okay, because my brother.
That's like stuck in my head that
Okay,
this is a Medlong
that's
story.
not it.
That's
No,
not yours?
The other one has to do with something about Oreos and premarital sex that was an analogy my brother used to talk about. So
okay, no, I don't
no
know
Oreos, no Oreos till marriage. That I thought because you knew my brother Jake pretty well, I thought you knew that one. Oh no, that was just a big family story. That was just like when I was a kid, being in a big family, anytime a box of cookies or anything would come in, you practiced your homeschool math and you counted out how many, you divided by how many people in the family, and that's how many Oreos you got. Usually like 2 or 3. And I remember after Bible college, I was living with somebody, and my friend Ed, who only had one brother, so they didn't have to divide boxes of cookies. And we went in splitting groceries, and we're eating some Oreos, and I ate a couple. And then I looked, and he ate half the package. I was like, dude, what happened? He's like, we bought them. Like, you can eat more than 3. He's like, yeah, we bought them. I was like, wait a minute, I can eat more than 3? That was not a healthy thing for me to learn. I gained a bit of weight that year. So anyway, I don't know what that story has to do with anything, but
that was my impression. You said that you grew up not having as much as I don't know. Anyway, well, keep going.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Random. So basically I get back to the States, and I'm really struggling because I really cared about a lot of the missionaries and people here in Ukraine and the people serving in the churches. And I thought, well, they need help. And at that time, a friend of mine, Stephen Pomeroy, had been kind of being missions coordinator for a short period of time. And then he left to move to Ukraine, of course, to move to Kharkiv, actually, for a year with his wife as an intern. And so during that time, Lord just spoke to me, like, serve the missionaries. And so I came to my pastor and said, hey, like, we need to serve these missionaries. There's really nobody giving them a voice in the church. There's nobody that's like the bridge between the church and them. And so I started to do that and serving them, like everything from like just, there are certain missionaries, especially guys that were there only a few years, single guys. I would probably chat with them like 3-4 times a week on Messenger, which we'd figure out the time difference and that back, or ICQ or whatever the typing service was. We would talk about life, talk about things going on. I'd pray for them. We would stay in contact with some Ukrainians and everything to that, to like running at midnight to Walmart to buy underwear for a missionary that had somebody coming to visit the next day, to flying to Ukraine, things like that.
Yeah.
Bring way too much money in my pockets over across the border when I came to visit them in Ukraine to help buy vans and stuff like that. But anyway, things like that. So during that time, I got good training to be a coordinator from a lady named Cassie Votter, who's a missionary, she has a mission called Servant Senders. And she trained me on how to plan missions trips, how to organize it, how to budget, how to serve missionaries. She trained me in a lot of ways. And really a lot of that stuff was the biggest part of my missionary training. I don't know that I would do as well if I don't know how I would have done here without her. And so during that time, and basically when it started, she's like, I don't want to train you if it's going to be a waste of my time, if you're just going to become a missionary next year. And I prayed about it, and I felt like, no, I want you to train me these people. I want to serve these people. And I felt like God had shut the door. And it was a very hard thing for me. You finish Bible college and everybody leaves. The people you spent 2 intense years with are gone. And that year was a year we actually split into 2 teams, and half went to England, half went to Ukraine. And we did the graduation before we left. So we all come back from the missions trip, and the teams didn't arrive the same day. So most of those people we never saw again. There were people on that other team I never saw. I never got to say goodbye to. And so all these things are going on. And this is God's giving this vision for serving missionaries in the churches here. in Ukraine. And it felt like a dream had died, because for a year and a half or a year or something like that, I had this dream, to be a missionary in Ukraine, but I had no details of where or what I was going to do. And then I just felt like it wasn't happening. Like sort of like with me coming to Bible college, it felt like it wasn't happening. And so I just kept seeking the Lord. And through that, the Lord's like, you just trust me, just trust me. And so I had to let the dream die to a degree, or not so much die as like, okay, Lord, I trust you. If you ever want me to be a missionary, great. Just like a couple years earlier, I had this plan for life. I felt God called me to ministry. I needed to go to Bible college. And I finally found, after years, I didn't go right after high school. I worked for several years. I finally found the Bible college I loved. And then God said no, but he sent my brother and my best friend. And then a year later, he let me go. And so during that, there's this, you find something, and then you have to, and it's not so much letting it die. I thought it was letting the dream die, but really what it was is God sometimes gives his vision, right? And then he has his call, but then he has his way and he has his timing. And sometime through the experience with Bible college and through the experience with the call to be a missionary, I've had to learn that when God puts something on your heart, he bursts it early in your heart. So you pray, and so you start focusing that way. But at the same time, you have to trust that God knows what timing. Even I had to come to this place where I had to say, Lord, maybe you gave me this vision for missions in Ukraine just so I can serve missionaries. I'm not going to try to say it can only be this way. I'm just going to trust you. I'm not going to hold on to it too tight. And so through that, I served missionaries. And then there was a point I took a missions trip team over to Ukraine, and I think it was 2004. And that lady Cassie, had taken another team independently over to another city, and we both ended up together at the national conference in Kiev. And during that time, the Lord started to speak to my heart. I'm here again. It was my third trip in 3 years. It was so real, and I so much loved it here. And I was in Kharkiv again. Actually, I was in Kharkiv, and I think we were in Dnipropetrovsk. And I loved both places, but I really loved Kharkiv. I really connected with the people in Kharkiv, and I just remember thinking, like, this is where I liked it, but I couldn't imagine. And I remember all the time we're walking in Kharkiv, and we see this huge Lenin statue, and I'm like, I thought they were all knocked down, but they weren't, And the people are like, yeah, they're standing there. And I said, okay, cool, And I kept being drawn every time. I just had to stare at the statue. It just drew my attention. And it wasn't until I moved here that I remembered when I was a kid. I kind of had forgotten that whole story, And I forgot about the Lenin statues and the falling down in the screens and the effect it had on me. But so basically, during that trip, God was starting to speak to my heart. And then I get to the conference, and I'm thinking, and I see Cassie. And I prayed. I said, God, like, after that commitment I made to her to train me, I don't want to just say I'm going to be here now, because that's what everybody else has done. I said, Lord, I need to know that it's you. And God gave me several verses and started to speak to me that if you want me to move to Ukraine, you got to have Cassie tell me. And now I don't advocate laying out fleeces very much, so to speak. But I think that I've noticed in very intense times in my life, from the attitude for me usually has been, Lord, like, I don't want to miss it. I want to make sure that this is you and not just me being emotional because I'm here. Yeah. And that's why I wanted to be sure, because I wanted to be sure it wasn't just the emotion of being here. Because at the same time, the still questions were there. How am I going to be finances? Who is it going to support me? All these other, what city I'm going to be in. There were all the questions. And so Cassie, who's just really open to talk to me, I figured she's going to want to talk to me, ask me how my first team was going. And she was just weird with me all week. She kind of wouldn't talk to me. She kept looking at me like I offended her, and I was like, okay, what's going on? Like, that kind of look somebody gives you when they think that you passed gas or something, they're just like side-eyeing you the whole trip. I'm sorry to be crass. My wife's going to be ashamed that I said that, but, and I'm like, what's going on? And finally, the last night of the conference, they had this big worship time, right?
Yeah.
And it's time for prayer, and like people can come up for prayer. It's like an afterglow service.
I love the conference.
And I'm standing there, and Cassie walks up to me. She grabs my hand. She's just a little tiny older lady. She's not old, older. And she grabs my hand. And she starts praying. She's like, I have to tell you something. I don't want to. Lord's been telling me to tell you something for 4 days, this whole conference. And I haven't told you. And she's like, it's time for you to go. Time for you to move to Ukraine. And I started smiling because she was afraid to tell me because I was going to be mad at her, And I was like, Cassie, I've been waiting for 4 days for you to tell me. I've been asking God for 4 days. So you resisting the Lord has been resisting my prayers, And she's like, really? And she still kind of didn't believe me, And she says, yeah, God says God wants you here. I said, okay. And so I came back and, long story, even longer, that missionary friend of mine, Stephen, that had moved to Ukraine for a year, came back to the States. And of that year he spent in Ukraine, like 7 or 8 of those months, he was basically the interim pastor because his pastor, Billy, the guy that was my former director, had gone back to the States to have a baby, and they had some complications, and they ended up staying a while. So Steve and his wife came back to the States to have a baby, and I was meeting with them weekly, kind of helping them with reentry, helping them as they came off the mission field and talking with them and praying. And it turned into me praying with them for what they're going through and helping them talk through what they're going through being back in the States, and me talking about getting ready and them praying with me about getting ready to move. And eventually there's a day they said, I was just not sure where to go. And so I was talking with the guys in Kiev, like the Marquis, about just moving to Kiev for a year to learn language and then see what God's doing. Because several missionaries over the years had done that. They had gone to Kiev and then they went out with new plans. And so Stephen came to me one day. He's like, hey, I got to tell you something. He's like, I think their baby had just been born, actually. I think it was right after we had gone to get coffee, to take his wife coffee in the hospital or something like that. I think it was right around that time. And he said, me and my wife are moving back to Ukraine and we're going to go start something new. I said, I'm going with you. And I just said it. I didn't even think, it was just like everything had taken so long.
Wow.
Then it was like, yeah, I'm supposed to go with you. And it was just like, and he's like, yeah, I know. He's like, yeah, we felt that way too. And it was just like, God had been preparing it all. And so now I had somebody to go with. We still didn't know what city. Before I had a city. No, I don't have a city, but at least I have somebody to go with. Him and his wife. And so we started to pray, and he just basically, he wasn't going to go back to Kharkiv because there was just some difficulties with a lot of the people that really, really enjoyed the ministry of Stephen. And it was very different from the other pastors' ministry. And so basically, like, he didn't want to cause a confusion there. He's like, we're just going to do something new. The original idea was to go to Alushta, which is in Crimea in Ukraine, now under the control of the Russians. And so I'm glad we didn't go there. But so, okay, we'll go. We had no idea. We didn't know anybody there. We just knew there weren't a lot of churches or any churches there. So we'll just go and see. And so we started praying, and eventually, Lord brought some supporters around. We came to Ukraine April Fool's Day, 2005. And we left our stuff in Dnipropetrovsk, and missionary Ben Morrison came with us kind of as a translator. We went down to Crimea, and we had taken a
he was already good enough with Russian in 2005 to translate. Dude, he's just like
Ben was teaching in Russian like a few months after he moved to Ukraine. I don't know if you knew that.
That's nuts. Yeah, I know he's a genius, but yeah.
Well, I'll tell you this: the last semester of Bible college, I never saw him do homework. Because all he would do is sit at Starbucks and read and copy words from the Russian dictionary and listen to Russian audio tapes. Yes. Not even CDs. So God gives people gifts that I do not have the gift Ben does of language. And so that was actually a week or so before he was to move to start the church plant in Sverdlovsk, where he's been ever since. And so it was just me and Stephen and him. We're having a good old time. We get to Crimea, we get to Simferopol, the capital, and we get on a marshutka, which is our minibus. And literally the moment the minibus was stopping, we were just about to get out in Alushta. Billy, the old pastor in Kharkiv, called Stephen and asked him, hey, God's calling me and my wife to move home. Would you consider coming and taking over the church? Because you'd already been there as a pastor for a while. And so Stephen was like, he didn't want to tell us because just the way things would work back then with some of those guys in ministry was like, everything has to be quiet until everything's official, and I don't work like that very much. And so he didn't want to tell us. And we're like, well, we're not doing anything. And, Ben's a very strong person. So he's like, you got to tell us what's going on. So he told us, so cool. I'm not staying. Why would I stay in the Alushta by myself in an apartment? I'll live for like 2 months to move home, So we walked around the city for a while, stuck our toes in the Black Sea, and then got on another train and went to Kharkiv, and that was it. And I remember, and I remember being there in Kharkiv and walking around, and I remember there's this day, it always just felt interesting. And I remember we're planning a work at an orphanage or something. I started remembering, when I was a kid, I used to pray for the Soviet Union that kids would hear about Jesus. And now we're doing work in orphanages. It's like, you know, and I just remember thinking like, wow, God answered that prayer of that 6 or 7-year-old kid, and not just answering prayer. He used me to answer that prayer. And that's why for me, whenever I used to see the Lenin statue, I loved the Lenin statue for this reason. For me, it was not a monument to communism. It was a monument to the power of God, because that person said, we don't need God. There is no God. And he's gone and he's dead. And God's still there. And the system this guy created that was supposed to last forever is gone too. Well, at least in Ukraine it is. And for me, it was a monument of what God could do. It was a reminder of when those statues came down on TV, in the early 90s, God used to speak to me to pray. And here I am as an answer to that prayer. So, yeah, that's the story, And so it's been 15 years. It's been 15 years I've been here. And, after, when I met my wife and we started talking about orphanage ministry right away. Her family, they were Christians during the Soviet Union. And they, as soon as the Soviet Union ended, they as a family prayed, like, how can we serve the Lord? And they've been serving since the early 90s in orphanages until recently. And so we just started serving. Once I met her, we started serving together. And because of that, like, eventually came to the point of God just saying, start taking some of these kids to be in our family.
Wow.
Because it all started, I was a little kid, Yeah.
Praise the Lord.
Hopefully that's the whole story you wanted to hear. And that only took, 40 minutes?
That's all right. Yeah.
Well, I see we've been on for 55 minutes, but for 15 minutes was goofing around. So.
Yeah. Thanks, brother. I love, love catching up, and I love hearing these stories of God's grace, and my hope is that if somebody's watching right now and if somebody's praying about, becoming a missionary or supporting missionaries or becoming involved in missions in some way, that these stories will be an encouragement, and maybe in some way, God's speaking, God's calling to those people. So, that's one of my hopes. So thanks a lot for sharing.
Cool.
The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, that I wanted to ask you about, is, we both went to the same Bible college at different times. And we both have a heart for teaching others how to preach, how to minister well, and that kind of thing. You said recently that you wanted to start something new, as far as like a Bible school or ministry training program or discipleship school or something like that. That's been tried several times, and it's kind of sputtered out or put on hold or those kind of things. What's happened before? What's going on now? What do you want to share about
okay,
your heart?
Sure. Well, I mean, since the day I got here, I've always thought it'd be great to have a Bible college here. I mean, I loved my Bible college. It wasn't the most typical Bible college in America. It was 2 years. And like I said, I think the total amount of students was up to 26 students. So we had like between 10 and 14 students per year class. And it was a good number. It was a good size. Everybody pretty much got to know each other, and it was very beneficial for me. In my Bible college, we had a lot of people that were teachers were guys that were actually in ministry. They weren't just professional teachers where their whole job was just being professors. They were guys that had some of them were church planters. Some were in nicer regions of the country and the state. Some were in very poor areas. Tom Camp, Jeremy Camp's dad was one of them. And actually, essentially, I don't know, did you see the new movie? Did you see the movie?
I haven't yet. No.
Super good. You got to watch it. We actually bought it, which we don't do very often.
Yeah.
But it was super good because there's the thing about it is it kind of showed, it didn't show much about the ministry, but it showed about the fact that they were pretty poor and like they were ministering for years and years with a lot of success, a lot of, number success. And so we had these different guys, and it was really cool for me to see different people's practical perspectives on ministry, because that's what I was looking for. I wanted actually hands-on. I'm more of a hands-on type person. And I always thought it'd be cool to do something like that here. Now, realizing the financial ability, I don't know how you'd be able to do it where someone would be able to work in Ukraine enough to be able to pay for their own self like I did, at least currently, at least with But at the same time, I've never felt like we needed to do heavily subsidized education, like foreign subsidized education, because it's not a sustainable model. It's one thing to bring in finances to start something, like to help build a building or to help do certain things, to do specific projects. But on the day to day, I just personally have the conviction that it's not practical.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, certain Ukrainians I know, certain people in this culture, sometimes look with suspicion on things that are super foreign funded, because this idea, like, you're not really us, you're not ours. And so I get it. But so I've just been thinking, like, what is a way to contextualize Bible college for here?
Yeah.
And what we've had, I mean, there are seminaries, you go to a seminary and they're great for some people, but they're not for everybody. And especially the intensiveness of the workload is not, and even the subjects, it's not necessarily, you have to be at a certain level probably for some people.
Yes.
And some people just don't have the time or the ability to do it. Now, I know people that are doing it, and it's great. Mm-hmm. It has a place. But the thing I like about Bible college that I went to, it was had to fill a specific need. It wasn't like a 3-month program. It wasn't like a summer camp. It wasn't like some sort of little like church program you did for 3 months or something, but it wasn't a 6-year or 4-year college. It had its niche. And I feel like we so far have tried doing 3-month intensive ministry training programs, and I've taught at them, and I think they were really great. But only a small amount of people are going to them. And a lot of the problem is because some pastors don't want to send their best guys because they might not get them back,
Yeah.
And so that's a problem. For us, I actually have a list of things that actually would be easier for me to look at, because to explain what the needs are. Like for me, there's a definite need for the ministry.
Do you have something you can send to me?
Yes, eventually. Yeah, I'll have to find it. Hold on a second. Okay.
This is actually something that Mike Pratt and I talked a lot about when I was working in New Horizons with the first church that I served in here in Lviv, the Calvary Chapel here in Lviv. And that was one of the things that we talked about was the fear of having people like sent to the Bible school, which is actually what happened to me in Indianapolis. I was serving in one church. I went to Bible college, and then I stayed at the church that has the Bible college. So I was trying to think of some way where like the Bible school here, because Michael wanted to start one too. At back then, of some way to incorporate internship as part of the curriculum or something like that, so that the local pastors would keep the people and have even an involvement in their education, if that makes sense. So, but yeah, keep going. Sorry to.
Yeah, I got it. I was just saying, right. You just send it to you right now. Messenger, right? You just wait a second.
Yeah, Messenger's fine.
Okay. So this is just the document that we wrote in the last year about what are the needs, the goals, and the target audience, and the main subjects that we're looking at. Mm-hmm. So basically, the need is just basically I'll just read it, it'd be easier.
Yeah.
There's just a need for solid training to equip people for the daily work of the ministry. There have been efforts to encourage church planning among all the Calvary chapels here between teaching and pastor conferences, national conferences, and the missions training program. But so far, we haven't seen as much progress as we hoped. A big part of that is that some of these pastors have been left with ministries by former missionaries that didn't extensively prepare them for the task at hand. So basically, there was a mistake, I would say, made by some foreign missionaries that when they've come, I'll say this, like, I know that I probably shouldn't say this on a podcast, but Calvary Chapel in general does not have a clear way for transition.
We talked about that with Joel in the last interview. This is a systemic thing, bro.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back. I mean, Chuck Smith didn't know how to do it, and you could even talk about. I stay out of the whole CGN CCA thing, but mm-hmm. to me, there's certain things about that tells me that it's hard. It's a hard question. Yeah. And so it's not just a Ukraine issue. It's just a general issue.
And it's not even just a Calvary issue. This is a hard subject in general. How do you pass on to the next leader, like anything?
Yeah, but especially in Calvary Chapel, which tends to be pastor-centered, What do you do when the church is built around a pastor and then he leaves or dies?
Yeah.
And then, okay, but especially as missionaries, because the goal of that pastor, you kind of do your ministry in front of people like you're the pastor, right? And people are used to that. But then with your mind is, my goal is to not be here forever. My goal is to train another guy.
Yeah.
And so the goal is good, but as far as the way things function day to day, it doesn't always work that way. And so there were several examples of pastors of churches that like, okay, I'm turning it over, and me and every other missionary is leaving like tomorrow.
Yeah.
And here's a guy who's been a Christian for 3 years. He's a pastor. And some of those churches to this day, 10 years later, are still barely surviving. Even if they were given a building, somebody's like, oh, we bought you a building, you have to pay for a building. But they couldn't even pay for the utilities of the building. You know, some of those guys have already turned their churches over to other guys. It's been a hard transition for a lot. And a lot of those guys have not had much training. Some have, but not all. And so the thing is what we've been doing for years with these conferences, like leadership conferences, one we had in the spring, with Nick Cady, another guy you had on recently. He's been coming helping do training, like
great guy,
to help equip people. But it's still, we can do more.
Yeah.
And so basically, if all we have is weekend conferences a couple times a year or seminary, there's a lot in between. There's a lot of people in between. And so like, you know, with the missions program we had in the past, with many full-time Bible colleges, church leaders are often hesitant or uninterested in encouraging their people to enroll because they fear losing their valued ministers. You know, that after being away for several months, they don't want to return. You know, you didn't go back to your original church. I didn't go back to Cleveland. Now, I didn't stay in Indianapolis. I moved on. And so I understand if I was to start a Bible college, my goal is not to keep people where they are.
Yeah.
And so you have these churches that are struggling already. And so the idea of sending somebody that they're never going to get back is real. I mean, that happened with the missions training program. There were some people that moved that never went back to their own cities. And that's fine. God works that way, but it's hard emotionally for pastors. And so what is our goal? The goal of the program, that for me, what I want to see in a program is to provide broad, practical, foundational education to help equip pastors and lay ministers for the daily work of the ministry in the local churches. Ultimately, I'd love to see a church planting training program.
Yeah.
But I kind of get this thing where you kind of got to crawl before you walk, before you run.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and to me, church planting ministry is running. And we've been trying to do church planting, and we've pretty much seen, it seems like we've kind of seen church planting stalled in recent years in Ukraine. We haven't seen as many churches planted, or almost any planted, in the last several years. I'm trying to remember the last one. Maybe Vinica was the last one. I could be wrong.
I think that's the last one that's really took off, because I know that there's a couple others that I know that were like somebody went out and they started a fellowship, and then they were there for a little bit, and then they thought, well, maybe we should go back, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and so it's kind of, and I know George Markey in Kiev has a real passion for church planting, and he's actually starting a new church plant in Kiev, sent out of the main church, a small plant. And
there's
I think
plenty of room in Kiev for more churches.
Yeah, and Kharkiv too, really. I mean, and so like, there's a need, but the thing is, for churches to reproduce, they need to be healthy, and they need to have strong foundations. They need to have strong ministers, so that they can train people to go out. And so, really, that's the problem. And so, what our goal is, like I said, the crawl, walk, run program, I call it, and a long-term goal of the program would be to start a more focused group, for church planting and missions. Also, and would love to be that program would be the kind of program people would want to send their best people and their most promising servants. But really, basically, obviously the big vision of Calvary Chapel in Ukraine is to plant new churches in Ukraine and beyond, right? But what's our target, Mike? Our target audience with this program we want to create is pastors with little or no formal training in ministry, for leaders in the church. They don't have to be pastors; they can just be leaders, and also for future leaders and pastors. Our goal is to provide a program that can minister to guys that are busy in the work of the ministry, that done in a way where they can be more equipped for what they're doing, but also for them to say, okay, I have these guys that are ministering in the church, and they're just helping out, but I don't necessarily have the tools to equip them. So can I send them like worship leaders, deacons, assistant pastors, like whoever. But then also the goal would be to look at these younger guys and girls that are serving the Lord, that you see the potential. Like we have a guy in our church, he's 19, he's about to be 20. He's starting to get involved in ministry, and he has a lot of potential. And he's one of the first guys I grabbed for my little pastor's training group. Yeah. And somebody's like, well, he's only 19. I'm like, well, he may start preaching soon because, we see what God's doing. And so this is the goal. And so like, really, like the subjects we're looking at is stuff like New Old Testament overview, IBS, introductive Bible study with a hermeneutic focus, theological methods.
Can you explain? There's been like 5 or so probably different people on my podcast that everybody has a different definition of what hermeneutics means. So give us your spiel on that. What is hermeneutics?
My understanding is just principles of biblical interpretation. Isn't that what it is?
Yeah, that's basically how I take it. I think if you get really like into the Webster dictionary, whatever thing, hermeneutics can apply even to Homer or law or something like that. It's the discipline of interpreting a passage of any kind of literature or something like that. But I don't know.
Sounds good. Sounds like a seminary. Sounds like a seminary question, and these are just Bible college subjects. So
Getcha. So sorry about that. But Old New Testament survey, IBS, Introductive Bible Study, hermeneutics.
Those together, because we've seen inductive Bible study without principles of biblical interpretation. We had some crazy heresy in Bible college that people would come up with in those classes. Theological method, just like how do we develop our theological methods.
Sweet. Church
history, I think, is super important. It's something I used to always teach at school ministry classes. I used to teach at a school ministry in Kiev, and I taught in those in the missions program too. I think it's very important for people to understand church history, because it helps us to understand what we're doing. And is when we think of new things, we can realize what God, just our context. Systematic theology with an apologetics focus. Nuts and bolts of preaching, just basically sermon prep preaching. Basically, a lot of what I'm doing with these guys now.
Yeah.
Church management, that's something we want to do long term. That might not be a whole class, but things about like how do you organize things in the church. And obviously it has different applications to the size of your church, but there's a lot of things that things I didn't learn in Bible college, like how do you set up accounting in your church? Like how do you decide who becomes how do you pick elders? Or how do you organize whatever, it's just practical things.
Yeah.
We may have a class on Christ and culture but especially biblical counseling is going to be a big focus. Those are the basic classes we've come up with so far. But, for us right now, the reason why we haven't moved forward much yet is because there's kind of been a discussion happening on how do we want to do this, or how should we do this? Because not just how we want to do it, it's not enough. But, originally we thought in Ukraine, there's a very popular form of study. They call it zauchny in Russian. I think it's a part-time modular studying where basically you have work you have to do at home, whether it's studying or papers or whatever. There's things you have to be ready. And then you come for your classes for a week or 2 weeks at a time, or a couple of days for these sessions for once a semester.
That's how we do seminary here in Lviv, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of seminaries work the same way, and it's very for the way the life works here. I think that Ukrainians, they work a lot, but they do also get a lot of days off. In general, most workers if you're working at a regular job, you don't get much money or anything, but you can take, it's a sacrifice, but you can take time sometimes.
Yeah.
And so we realized no matter what, the program that would work in this culture right now is that kind of part-time program, because seminaries are doing it. Lots of universities do it for people continuing their education that work full-time. And so that would be the program. The question is we're trying to figure out how to do it, because one option would be to have book some reading. We'd find a teacher to come for a week, or 2 teachers. We could have one. The goal is to have each class have about between anywhere from 14 to 18 hours of lectures per class, no more. Because I think that's about what we had in Bible college. Where it's obviously a goal. It's a limitable goal. Obviously, you've told me you guys have a lot more in seminary than that, right? 40, isn't it?
Well, I haven't, like I said in our conversation over the phone, my program is specifically geared towards bivocational pastors. So there is the director of the program, he has his feet on both pedals, if that makes any sense at all.
Mhm.
Like he tries to gauge what we can handle and then adjust as
Yeah.
far as that. But it is a lot of work, and there have been times when we've had it's more on the level of understanding, really, of the type of work it is, because we've had classes where we have the worship leaders like program takes the same class as us, or the church planting leaders program takes the same class as us, or something like that. And it's going to sound super prideful, but I think also it's just how it should be. Is pastors have to be on a higher level theologically. They have to be trained in a deeper way. And there's been times when, like, a pastor will raise his hand and give a question, and the entire rest of the room goes silent because only the pastors know what we're talking about. And everybody else is like left behind, so there's a difference between like our level of study and what they teach the worship leaders, or our level of study and what they teach the rest.
And that's fine. I think that's fine, and I think that's good. I think that's what seminary is for. Like,
Yeah.
what we want to see created is not a replacement for seminary. It shouldn't even be a competition.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
My encouragement, if somebody goes through our program and they say, I want to get deeper into these subjects, because obviously you're not going to suck the marrow out of hermeneutics if you're splitting it with a 16-hour class with inductive Bible study. And our goal is just to get people more equipped than they were before. And
yeah.
And so it's more
and
of
the basic tools of hermeneutics. I mean, this is my favorite thing. The basic tools of hermeneutics, you can get through. You can like rush through it in 6 hours, and you will be more equipped after the 6 hours than you were before. So like,
yes. I mean, for me, it's kind of interesting. Like, one thing I'm struggling as I'm teaching these guys to preach. So much of my process is born out of the fact that I've been a Christian for 35 years.
Yeah,
and I've been reading the Bible since I could read. My hermeneutic process was more kind of organically learned by listening to such a broad range of Bible teachers through the decades. One thing I grew up on was the Moody Radio Network.
Dude.
What's it called? Moody Radio, or whatever it's called.
I listened to that all the time when I lived in Indianapolis.
On the car, everywhere I lived, you'd get it. No matter where you are in America, for the most part, you can find it on the radio. And I listened to it as much as I could while I was in the States. My kids would get bored in the car, but listening to guys like Ravi Zacharias, listening to guys like James Irwin, who's that Scottish guy from Ohio? Alistair Begg.
Yes.
David Jeremiah. So many guys from so many different guys from different church backgrounds, but teaching through the word, and then being in Calvary Chapel, being, in a house where the word was taught. A lot of my hermeneutics are things like principles I picked up so much over the years that by the time I took a hermeneutics class, it was kind of like, I was glad that it was organized, but I couldn't tell you that I learned anything new because I developed it that way. But now I realize people don't have that benefit. So many people even only come in from one church background who haven't had the multiple angles to kind of broaden your hermeneutic experience. I'd say, I think it's important. And I think any Christian could benefit from that kind of thing. So I think basically kind of where the discussion is, how do we do this class thing? Because one option would be, the lowest cost option is you invite a teacher to come, whether it's a Ukrainian guy or an American pastor, to come for a week. You get people to take 4 or 5 days off, and we have 1 or 2 classes intensive all day over the course of 4 days, like 2-3 times a year. The way that if we pick 9 subjects in 3 years, you could have 3 sessions. No, actually that's not true. We could do it in less than 2. We can do it in 2 years. If we had 12 blocks, so to speak, some of these classes would take 2 blocks. Like Old New Testament survey would take 2 blocks. Probably counseling would probably take maybe take 2 blocks. For sure, church history would take 2 blocks. Basically we had a total of 12 blocks. You split over 6 a year, 2 per time you meet. That was kind of the original idea. We can get started. All we need is to find pastors, and then people would go home. They'd have homework, and then in the course of like a couple of weeks or a month, they'd have to turn in papers or things like that, or some sort of thing. Like, that was the original idea, and I still really like the idea. But because of the way things work now, and especially this quarantine has shown, so much is more online. And so we've been trying to think through how to do this, flip the classroom, so to speak, where instead of spending all those hours in the classroom, we have people, we record the teachings.
Mm-hmm.
And then people, we want to create an online platform where people could watch things. Now they couldn't just, you have to, it's always, it's with passwords, and people have to come in and they can only watch the next video once they finish whatever they needed to do, homework or whatever related to each class.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would maybe a couple times a year have 2-day intensive seminars where we would have practical application. Like for instance, if it's inductive Bible study method, people come together and we work on it together and we talk about it together. Or, maybe it's whatever it is, or counseling or different things where we could have speakers come for the speaking time where it's more question and answer. So it's less intensive time with people having to travel,
Mm-hmm.
though I still think that personal connection is important if it's possible. But to do that, right now, the reason we actually were supposed to have a conversation with somebody around the time of the conference, but the person decided not to come to Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
About there is some Calvary Chapel, I think it's even a CGN organization, that had been doing something in Romania called Reach, where my understanding was a similar kind of thing, where they were helping them with providing like website and providing, content.
Mm-hmm. Is it Reach spelled with 2 R's by any chance?
No.
Okay.
No. It's just a little thing. The only thing is it's so hard to find any information on the internet about it. I just found it in like 1 or 2 lines of like some sort of CGN document I found. But
okay.
I've talked to a few people about it. It's in Romanian. And so we were supposed to be talking with somebody about them helping us start something like this, but
Mm-hmm.
because of the quarantine, everything's been on hold. So
Mm-hmm.
it seems like that's probably what we want to do long term is.
Can I throw a curveball your way?
Sure. Throw them all you want.
I have noticed with our class, talking to the students in the seminary and stuff like that, that our effectiveness as students, as the process of learning and everything has crashed since we moved to everything online with the quarantine. Now, I think some of that is, I think a lot of that is just everybody getting used to the new formats and everything. This is not what the guys signed up for one thing. We're used to a different format. But the other thing is there is a huge block where it's much easier to dig in and focus on a class when you leave for 6 days, because that's what usually guys do. They come on Sunday evening and they leave on Friday afternoon to Lviv, and they have to do that once every month and a half, for our program.
Wow. Every month and a half. How do people do that? A week for every month and a half?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the pastor's program, and they like that a lot more than having to try to find time at home to watch classes. When kids are yelling, everybody's home right now with quarantine, so that's already hard, but and then jobs and everything. They've said it's really hard to be present for these classes, to really like dig into them. And so, one of the things that you and I talked about is, like doing this online, and I'm all for like these new technologies. But okay, I've got like a follow up. But what do you think about that? Have you thought through that?
Personally, that has always been my perspective. What you said, that's not a curveball for me. It's how I've always felt. I feel like for me, I learned better that way. I'm just trying to find what's going to work better, because we're just trying to work with feedback that people are saying. Other people that I'm not working by myself on this.
Of course, yeah.
This is what other people really want to do, and so. But I mean, I can see it. Like for me, that's why. Like for me, it would, if we did a lot of the classes online, there would have to be the class element. Kind of finding the hybrid view. I would prefer personally to have more of the time in the classes and less time online, because for the same exact reason. But like, I think it's kind of one of those things where it's faster and in some ways easier to set it up this way, where everything's in person, as far as like logistic on our side.
Yeah.
For people, there's more of a commitment. They have to leave, take time off work, and come and do that, of course. And for them, and so the question is, no matter what, it's harder for somebody. For us now, because like, for instance, if we did it not online at all, we could be up and running in like a few months, probably. I mean, of course, we have to wait for the quarantine over. We could create, because now I have to have teachers take record all these videos.
Yeah.
And then I got to get somebody that's going to sit and transcribe everything and then translate over it. And then we have to overdub it. Then we have to process the videos. So it's a ton more work, and a ton more resources. And honestly, I don't know how we're going to get it completely functioning very well unless we were able to get funding for paid things. So that's why we're waiting to see what will happen with this organization. But you got me thinking, actually, because there's a good possibility that once this quarantine's over, come fall, pastors meeting, I meant to we'll revisit the issue that maybe if we don't think we can do it online, we may try to start it offline. Because I don't know.
That we're talking through right now, I'm like,
no, I appreciate that. I appreciate the insight, because
I'm one of the students that tries to have as much contact with the administration of our school as much as we can. After working in the Bible college in America and then moving over here, it's just kind of a natural thing where they even offered me a job once, which I didn't take. But anyway, so they one of the things that we are working on right now is kind of a hybrid thing where Zoom allows you to have like a webinar type class where you still have almost that kind of connection where you have a scheduled time, people are in class, they're sitting in front of their computer and they have to be engaged and they can ask questions. And that is a key thing, is when you're processing the information and listening to the lecture, and then you can ask questions during the lecture. I think that'll be the big thing that'll spark the learning fires, of our master's program.
And I think it's true, because I've heard it said that there's been a lot of studies about the way people that are older learn versus the way people are younger. And people that are adults tend to learn more through interaction, through practical trying things themselves. I mean, that's been the way I've learned my whole life, really. I think it drove my parents crazy by how many questions I asked. I mean, we've been like, I think I mentioned earlier, like we've been working on, getting some chickens. And my wife for years wanted to get them. And I was like, no way, I'm no farmer. But then over the years, I've noticed I go to the States and all my friends living in,
and there's
not farmers. It's like, it's happening. I'm like, well, especially now with situations. And I have a friend, and I'm driving this one person crazy, a friend or a guy who's a new missionary. He's a Mennonite missionary here that just started in the village. And they were farmers in Oklahoma. And I've been asking a million questions about chickens and, different things. And that's the way I learned. I have to ask questions. I have to be interactive. And so for me, if we're going to do it online, it would either be live through Zoom, or you have like a forum online for people to question back and forth. That's the hard thing. And the difficulty is, we would want to have as many Ukrainian teachers, professors as possible. But the one thing that I appreciated about my Bible college experience was we had different people from different walks of life, different cultures, really, that we could learn from. And so I think that there are some people that have a unique perspective that could teach. I mean, we can take guys from every other seminary, and we may have some guys teach some classes, but there's certain things I would rather have a perspective. Like there's a guy that would love to teach church history. He's in Ireland. He's a pastor in Ireland, but he used to be a missionary here. The guy that used to be the pastor here, Stephen Palmer, we've been talking to him about doing Old and New Testament overview. He's very gifted in that, especially Old Testament overview, But, and so with those, you have doing a Zoom live stream. How do you do it? You have to work with the time zone difference. You have to, you got to figure out how do you do translation. And so that's the thing. That's the thing we have to figure out. For me, it's a dream. It's a night. And I think you kind of asked that curveball question that actually helped me to say what I've been thinking for the last few months is like, if this thing's going to get off the ground anytime soon, I don't know that it's going to be able to start that way. And it just may be that. It just may be that kind of situation. And so I think the best thing is to try to find a hybrid format. The reality is part-time works in Ukraine. A lot of people can do it. It's a sacrifice, but you know what? Education and ministry is always a sacrifice. For me, I had to leave my hometown. I had to work in Bible college 30 hours a week. Basically, I slept, I studied. No, I didn't really sleep. I studied. I think if I got 4 hours a night of sleep during my first year of Bible college, that was a good night.
Oh, wow, dude. That's,
Yeah, because I just I know we weren't allowed to have our lights on. I know you are one of the dorm inspector guys. I heard some
I'm also
scary
just kind of an
things, like,
insomniac, but yes.
yeah. So we would study by candlelight in our room when I know we're not supposed to have candles, but we did anyway because we didn't know what else to do. Yeah. And so like I would stay late because I would work from 1:00. I would have class from 8:30 till 12:30, and then 1:00 or 1:30 I'd start work till 10 at night, and then come home and I'd have to do homework and do Chuck tapes back when they were still tapes the first year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, it's a sacrifice. So I realized that no matter what, it's going to be a sacrifice for people.
Mm-hmm.
But I just see like there's just the need for the equipment. And even this thing I'm doing with these guys, it's funny online. For us, some things we found for church organization have been better online. Like this, three of the guys in our class, I think, three of the guys are IT guys, and right now they're working from home, but they have some of them work for actual companies where they have to be at their computer at 10 in the morning, and so we have a meeting every morning from 8:30 to 9:30. And it's like a strict thing. Once 9:30 is done, I just turn it off. And I know if you know the history of our church, us doing things on time, it's not very good.
And we're struggling with that ourselves right now.
It's always been a struggle. And, they say it's a cultural thing. People like to start things late and go late. But for some reason, very few people miss their trains, which are notoriously to the second on time.
Yeah.
In this country. And so it's funny. But so we, for that, it gives us the flexibility. We could talk for an hour and we can go about our day. We don't have to spend time getting places. Like for me, it takes me 45 minutes to go to where our church is usually.
Mm-hmm.
So an hour and a half round trip to have an hour meeting just doesn't make sense. So
yeah.
I don't know with the Bible college thing. I just see it, especially now, because I've only recently been put in the position as a head pastor. Maybe temporarily, maybe before our head pastor decided to take a break. Take a step back from ministry, and he hasn't decided whether or not he's going to step back or not. But so for me now, the biggest thing that I see as a head pastor right now is I need more guys trained. I don't want to be the only guy doing everything, and I shouldn't be. I can't be. I don't want to lose my family. If I'm doing everything every day of the week, then like I'm going to lose my family. It's not practical. And so my goal right now is to spend as much time training these guys and training leaders. And I'm like, man, if we had this program already, I could just send them. So what I'm having to do is start this thing. And maybe what may happen, this little group I'm meeting will turn into the bigger group that we're doing. And so I think it's so important to see guys trained. And like I said, I love that seminary is there for some people, but I think for the majority of guys in our churches, they're not going to ever go. Most of them just weren't. Because maybe it's a mental block. Maybe they think it's bigger than it is. But some of them just, like you said, a week, every month and a half, I can't think of one pastor I know in Calvary Chapel right now that's financially able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but that's great. But there should be something in between that and just doing a conference once a year.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And I've also been praying through and thinking about this kind of a random subject, but praying through and thinking about these different stages of training. I think everything for pastors should be practical, but then I've started to actually appreciate the theoretical side of seminary, if that makes any sense. Like now that I'm starting to rub shoulders with these guys that have the PhDs on PhDs. I'm a practical guy, but I need those guys in a lot of the questions that I'm tackling, So there's definitely different degrees of what people are called to and.
Yeah. Well, that's even why we think it's important to have things like theological method and some of these different things to give you a foundation in that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's the goal. I think it's just their goal is to be very practical, to meet people where they're at in the churches right now and help them get to the next level. Long-term plan, great. Send them on the seminaries. One of my biggest dreams would be to see us have a program specifically for missions training where people are sent to go there to get trained. And then when they leave there, they go onto the mission field out of Ukraine.
Yeah.
Or church planning. But I just realized to get churches to plant new churches in Ukraine, they need to be strong. And And that doesn't necessarily mean they need to be 200 people churches or 500 people churches.
No, yeah.
There needs to be more people that are equipped to do the ministry, and we need to find a way to get it to them.
And that's our calling, Ephesians 4. That's what we have to be doing as the church.
One thing I've been thinking about is, like, I don't know if you read David Guzik's commentaries.
Not recently. No, I'm like, I don't read a whole lot of commentaries right now, at least.
But have you ever? I meant, have you ever?
Yeah, yeah. In the past,
Guzik is on. For people that don't know, he's one of the main commentaries on the Blue Letter Bible website. He has his own app and stuff. He's a Calvary Chapel pastor, but he's written some really good commentaries. Basically, I like to say, if you read his commentaries, you're basically reading like 5 or 6, because he's quoting a lot of other ones all the time. It's just a good, solid commentary for people. Even the way it's organized for people that are young teachers, it's a great resource for people to like use as creating a structure for their messages. And there's lots of good information. But some people have started slowly translating into Russian. I'd love to see them all translated into Russian and Ukrainian.
Sweet.
But of course, for people to translate, there needs to be money for them to work, because nobody can sit and translate for hours and hours without getting paid. I mean, my wife is slowly translating children's ministry material that she needs. It's only in English, and slowly translating some women's ministry courses. Finally, somebody recently, some Baptist missions organization actually is going to offer to pay her for a translation that she was already doing anyway. And so once it's done, it could maybe be published, and so
awesome.
I just would love to see more good, solid resources. Yeah, I'm not saying commentaries or that commentaries for everybody. I'm just saying that's an example of a good, within the Calvary Chapel context, it's a good, solid Calvary Chapel
for sure
resource.
Yeah, one of the things that I think that we need more as Calvary Chapel is those types of resources. And even like I thought of, like, not that I'm in any way qualified right now to do this, but I thought of like one of the things I could do when I'm old is to write like a Calvary Chapel systematic theology, if that makes sense. So that just like something that I've daydreamed about, if that makes sense. So
cool. Yeah,
it'd be an interesting thing.
Yeah, because most of the books in Calvary Chapel are not like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think there's a couple things I've been thinking about. I know that you talked with Nick Cady. Do you guys talk about the Expositors Collective at all?
Yeah. I actually wanted to talk about one of the posts with your number 6 and number 2, the IBS hermeneutic, and then the nuts and bolts of preaching. But go ahead. What were you?
Well, no, those were things that. Just so you know, Nick Cady was working with me on this list, by the
way. Sweet, dude. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, him and I, and I've actually, this has just been a thought in my head last few weeks. It's like, if we can't get this, maybe a stepping stone to this bigger program, maybe doing something more similar to the Expositors Collective here. Similar, like I don't know if you listen to their podcasts. I listen to a lot of their podcasts right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know exactly how that would work, but I think that there's a lot of elements of the Expositors Collective. I think that could be pretty helpful for us in Ukraine.
Okay, let's keep talking about that, because I'm going to have Mike Neglia on sometime next month, and I want to ask him about how he started Expositors Collective, and that could be one of the things that we could like ask him about.
Yeah, I've actually never met him. Okay, I met Mike Neglia one time.
Okay.
In 2006 at a wedding in Ireland, but I'm sure he doesn't remember me. He actually, the Irish friend I mentioned, Shane, who I've been talking to about coming back to teach a church history class when we do this, I should say. Shane actually, he was a missionary in Ukraine for 4 years, working with InterVarsity or SSH, IFES or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And when he left here, he was going to Mike's church and was teaching there. And Mike actually did some early videos with him. Like if you look on YouTube, Mike Douglas, you can find some old interviews with Shane. So that's cool. I've actually been wanting to meet him again and talk to him just about this kind of stuff. But so there's that. He has that indirect connection to Ukraine that way through Shane.
Yeah.
Shane lives in another city now, so they don't work together anymore. But yeah. And so the thing for me is just, I kind of have this thought right now, it's just kind of brewing in my head, is if we can't ready to get this online stuff going, maybe we can do more conferences. Now it's interesting because certain inspiration for certain things that Nick has been taught at Expositors Collective, he took from some things he was teaching here at our pastors conferences. So I'm just still trying to figure out how it would work. I really have no idea how it's going to work yet, but I have this idea of doing more often mini, like 1-day conferences, like say Friday evening to Saturday afternoon, like in different cities, where it's just more like interactive teaching training. It's just an idea right now. And so I don't know. I got to, this
Would that be anything like what C2C does with Ben Morrison, like his 2-day like intensives?
I don't know, because I don't know a lot about what it is. I think that is a long-term program specifically for church planting, but there may be some similar.
Oh, I'm not talking about Incubator. I'm talking about his there's like a Christocentric seminar that he does. It's like a day and a half thing. So Incubator is a different thing.
I don't really know. I actually couldn't tell you.
I get you.
So I don't know. It's just a thought that I'm having right now as maybe a lead-in to establishing this Bible college program.
Cool.
I'm just trying to think. I'm trying to think. Like, I was kind of hoping I didn't have to do another intermediate step between that program and what we're doing now. But, well, as you've seen, I don't know if you've noticed, I think I've talked to you about this, we have in Ukraine in general, except for when there's a giant virus threatening the whole world, we have 3 main conferences every year.
Yeah.
We have our national conference, which usually happens in the spring, which is for all churches, anybody in the churches. And it's more a broader reaching conference. It's usually 4 days, 3.5 days. And the teaching, it's about ministering, encouraging people in the church. Like, if you've been walking with the Lord, it's about, the focus is to encourage people to keep walking. If you're new in the Lord, encourage you to decide to make these steps of faith and to grow with the Lord, things like that. It's a bigger, broad, and only in the last few years have we kind of tightened the vision for it, really only the last year. And then we have a fall conference, which is just for ordained pastors, assistant pastors, a time to get together. Sometimes there's teachings, but a lot of the focus is more interaction. We're just talking about issues that pastors are going through. But then in the spring, we've been doing this leadership conference. It used to just be for men, but now we've opened it to all leaders of both genders, people that are basically, I would even better say servants than even leaders. It's people that are involved with everything from children's ministry to whatever. And that's a time of practical training. It's just a day, basically. It's about 24 hours from Friday afternoon to Saturday afternoon. And it's just training for practical things in ministry. And that's good. It's better than we've done in the years past. But, I would want to do more, but also be sensitive to people's time. So one thought I've been having lately, I've been kind of shooting around, is doing a couple more mini regional conferences just for one day, specifically with the goal of training and preaching, for instance, because that's what the Expositors Collective is really about, is about preaching.
Yeah.
And so that's something we may do in the future, just these mini little conferences. And probably in that case, we may do them in different cities. I mean, generally the idea is to do them in Kiev a lot because it's central to everybody, but it may just work to do one in Kiev, one in Lviv, or one in Ternopil, or one in Kharkiv, not at the same time, but like every several months we do it in a different place. I don't know. It's just an idea I'm playing with right now, because I just see, for me, I want to help equip these guys more, and to bring more influences than just me would be good. And so, cool. Anyway, that's just kind of what I just want to see guys trained up. That's always been my goal. When I first came to Ukraine, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was 26 years old. So I used to go around churches and train sound guys, like not how to be super crazy people, just basically how to get rid of problems. It's like 90% of the problems in most small churches is just because of feedback, is just learning how to get rid of problems. And then, people can hear the word taught. People can worship the Lord without problems. And I did that in a couple of different places. I even did that in Kyrgyzstan. I mean, that's what I did in early ministry, because the point is to help people grow and help people receive the word. And so for me, this stage of my life, as I'm an old geezer now, I'm 41, and look, all this is all gray or not gray. It's either gray or lack of hair. I don't want, I spent a lot of years running cables and setting up equipment and, whatever. And I'm okay with doing it if I have to, but I think now I want to invest more in the next generation, just that my time would be more useful. So if we can create a way to reach all the guys in Ukraine, great. And then they can reach other countries. Awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, we're almost out of time.
Yeah, they I know you're discipling those guys, and I'm sure you have plenty of resources with Nick Cady and everything. But my passion right now, and the thing that I'm trying to specialize in, and the thing that I want to teach right now is preaching and how to do hermeneutics well and homiletics well. So yeah,
And
if I can be of service, I would like to.
I'll let you know. I mean, honestly, I've been teaching the Bible for a while.
Of course.
For years, mostly been small group formats, and so it's a very different format. And for the last 11 years, pretty much, I've been teaching our midweek service, which is always a smaller service. You know, anywhere from 10 to 20 people. And so I'll honestly say, like, I don't think that I know I have a lot of work to do on my style of preaching and even my preparation. And that's something I've been working on the last few months, is really getting better at it. And so, like, for me, I'm comfortable with teaching these 5 guys because I know more than they do, but like, I recognize I even need these things. So when I think about the Expositors Collective group, I'd like to be in these groups. You know, and so yeah, I think it's great. I think we need more people doing that here, and you know, especially people who have time here and are comfortable, you know, in the culture and that people are going to receive, you know. So I think cool.
Cool. If you'd like to know, like, my model or whatever, I made a blank. No, that's not the right word in English. How would you say that? Like
Template?
Yes, a template. Thank you very much. I made a template for sermon prep that I could send you. It's in Ukrainian. I made it for Ukrainians. So, yeah.
Sure.
Cool.
My Ukrainian's probably good enough to read it.
Yeah. Good.
I'm kind of like a dog.
It's pretty bare bones. So, yeah, I've heard that one before.
I'm like dog. I can understand, but I cannot answer back. Yes. No, I can answer a little bit back in Ukraine. I used to spend several days in Chernobyl or something. But yeah.
There you go. Your Ukrainian is probably at least as good as my Russian. Like, or I mean, vice versa. Like, anyway, my Russian is like, I can have a very simple conversation.
Yeah, it's like, it's so funny. We live in the same country, but at opposite ends. It's like,
yeah, sometimes
it's like somebody from New York City going to like South Alabama and trying to have a conversation. It's like so different.
Yeah.
So because I can understand people speaking Ukrainian here pretty easily, because the way they talk is different. But Lviv, they go up like 2 octaves when they go. They're like, how do you talk that? It's probably those skinny jeans that make you talk that high. No, I'm joking. It's just a different, even getting used to the inflection.
The rhythm's different. Yeah, I mean, the accent's definitely different. There were people actually, like, I'm told that my accent is really good in Ukrainian. Like, people sometimes think that I'm from here and I just lived in America for a long time or something like that. And so I went to Kharkiv a couple of years ago, and there were people that understood me better in English than they did in Ukrainian.
Oh, that happens with me in Lviv. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a friend here from Kharkiv that first time he went to Lviv, he spoke Ukrainian growing up. He was from Moldova. Yeah. But he would try speaking Ukrainian in Lviv, and people were like, can you speak English or speak Russian? Because they couldn't understand his accent. They were having a hard time with the way he talked in Ukrainian. So.
Yeah, Poltava Ukrainian is pretty unique, though, as well.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well,
great talking with you, bro. Can I share this document with like in the description of the video? Is that all right? Or is that
sure? Yeah, it's just the bare bones kind of like 1-page statement of what our goals are. The subjects, like the class titles, it's still kind of, those are just our initial thoughts of what we should offer.
Yeah.
I don't know that. Obviously, the first half of the list is a lot more like, the last couple are like maybes, but
yeah.
Well,
there's been a couple people on the Calvary Chapel prayer thing that have asked about if we're planning on doing a Bible school or that kind of thing, and so we've been praying for that. Like, not just me saying that that's going to happen, but there've been people asking about it. So
yeah, it's only going to work if several people are involved. Like if there's several people. Now, one thing I've learned is, when we talk, I don't tend to talk with a ton of people anymore. Like the first time we talked about it at the conference, after a conference, with like 15 people, and so many people had so many thoughts that I was like, we're never going to get off the ground. But like, it's just finding the right amount of people that actually want to be involved and are going to be involved in the actual day-to-day of actually forming the vision. But also, we just need people to do it. And so we just need wisdom. That's something to pray for. We need wisdom on how to walk through this. and what's the best thing. Like I kind of, maybe it's because I grew up in a big family where we never had everything we needed. Sometimes you just kind of got to do what you got to do for now.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that is a thought. Maybe that we have to think through how to do it. It's hard to plan anything right now during this current situation. And so, even with financial restraints, I mean, the idea of starting a program to raise funds right now for a new program, like online, like to me, it's just like, I mean, I don't know about you, but we've lost some of our supporters during this quarantine because they don't have any income. They're like, well, I don't have any income. I can't send anything out. Like there's businesses that people support us from their business. And if their business is closed, there's no money. And so they can't send it. And so this isn't necessarily the best time to start a new ministry that requires a big financial startup cost. And so
yeah.
But at the same time, God could still do it. But I see the need's still there with my guys. I wish I had a place to send them, but no, I'm meeting with them every Wednesday morning. And so, but I can do that. But a lot of the pastors don't have that ability to. Anyway, now I'm starting to repeat myself.
So what can we pray for you? Wisdom for the program, financial, how else can we be praying for you guys?
Just pray for us as a church as we walk through this current quarantine situation. I mean, we need wisdom on how to take our next steps as far as the church, because right now, because we're still in the country not allowed officially to meet in big groups. And while we know there have been some churches in other regions in smaller towns, like I recently heard about some people in Odessa and Chernogorsk that are like, whatever, all the other churches are opening, so we're opening. And they're even announcing it on videos. And I was like, even though we could do that, there's some people in our church that would like to do that. Like who cares what the government says? Let's just open. But for us, we need the wisdom, because for me, it's not even the base questions about the government. My wife has a very close friend whose father just died this morning in Kharkiv from coronavirus.
Oh gosh.
And the daughter, she's a doctor, and she was treating patients in the hospital, and somehow she got sick, and then he got sick. So like, it's still active, and there's still people. And she was 35. She survived, but she got very, very sick. And her father just died. Okay. And so the reality is, as a pastor now getting put into this position right when the quarantine starts, like, we need wisdom. Not who cares what the government says, like what is the most loving thing to do for our church right now, whether it's the young people in our church or the older people or whatever. Because fine, if we get together, nobody gets sick, great. But if we get together and we have a meeting and people die, people talk about, well, what's the media going to say? Like, yeah, that is a problem. But the biggest problem is what's going to happen to the life of that person if it's something that we easily could have prevented it, or we just wanted to show that we're not afraid of anything. We're starting the meeting. So it's not about fear.
Yeah.
We're not, like I mentioned this, I had to write this in a group the other day for our leaders because we were talking about this. And I said, guys, this is not about fear.
Yeah.
It's about us respecting the position that we're in, respecting that we have a responsibility to take care of our church. And so we just need wisdom. What we started doing last 2 weeks is we have split the church up into groups. We have 6 homes where people are hosting home groups on Sunday, where up to maximum of 10 people, because that's what's allowed in the country right now, people to meet, but they sign up, and that's their group for the next month or so. And so, but only about half the church signed up, and only half the church is coming. So half the church is super excited. They're fellowshipping. We're all still watching the live stream together, which we're pre-recording, and we're hosting one in our house. But then there's a lot of people that are staying home. And for those that stay home, we have somebody that's leading a Zoom group after the service to talk. And so there's already questions about what's the next step. And so we just need wisdom from the Lord, how to serve the church best during this time. And for me and my wife, we just need strength, because really, in some ways, we're more busy than we've ever been. We're spending way less time in the car driving to and from ministries, but we're actually spending more time actually doing ministry, because we're having multiple study groups online. We're meeting with people that can't get out. My wife's discipling some women from the youth group that are back in their hometowns by themselves with no churches. And so we just need strength from the Lord.
Yeah, for sure. We've been feeling that same thing. I think you and I prayed for each other.
Yeah, and I'd say one last thing. Yeah, one last thing is like 2 of my older kids have moved out and they're not walking with the Lord at all. And I'm just praying that God would grab a hold of their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So anyway, that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Can we pray right now?
Sure. Yeah, and then I actually really got to go because we have some people in our house right now.
Okay.
So you can guess.
Let's pray. Lord God, thank you so much for Nate and for Diana and their wonderful family. And I pray that you bless them, Lord. Give them strength, rest, fellowship as a couple, Lord. Give them your I don't know, peace, your spirit, Lord, together. And I pray that you would give them those sweet moments when they can just fellowship together. Lord, give them strength for ministry, give them strength for love for their family. I pray for these 2 older kids that you would return them to you, Lord. You haven't given up on them, and we haven't either. Pray for the home groups. I pray for this idea of what the most loving thing to do during quarantine is. I pray that you would protect the church from anybody getting sick, protect the church from any threats from the government. And then pray also for the financial needs of both the church and their family. Bring more supporters to them, maybe through this podcast or otherwise. And then also I pray for wisdom and strength and vision for this program, Lord, that it would begin to crawl and then walk and then run with planting churches, with sending out missionaries, with equipping the body of Christ. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Cool,
Thank
man.
you so much for your time, Nate. I really appreciate being able to catch up on everything.
Yeah, cool. Well, at least I beat Joel, but it was still longer than I hoped.
No problem.
Well, hopefully you'll split into 2, so it'll be so bad. Anyway,
God bless you, bro.
love you, brother.
You
Hey,
too,
bye.
man. See you.